Hello, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me. My name is Stephen Ablonsi, and this is my maiden voyage. I am nervous as all heck, so I'm hoping that you can forgive my nervousness. But with me here is my friend Alex. Everybody, I think, here knows Alex from Alex the Historian's YouTube channel. Say hello, Alex.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Stephen, for letting me be on.
Oh boy, this is a change, isn't it? Usually it's Alex that's hosting, and I'm the one who's just sitting on the sidelines. So it's a very interesting thing here. Oh, I need to turn. Well, yep. See, already one gap there. I need to turn that off. So we're going to talk about comparisons with the Queen Mary and the SS Poseidon. I hope if everybody can hear me, okay. Speak up in the chat. I've got the live chat up so I can see comments. I'll try to keep it up as best I can. Wonderful, Mike. Thank you. Um, we're gonna we're gonna look at some comparisons. We're gonna look at some screenshots. We're gonna look at some shots from the Queen Mary. I'll tell you, it's a little difficult. And Alex, you know this too. We want to try and we want to go on board and take shots of things that we want to talk about, but we don't have the ability to do that. So, so we're out looking at what shots we can find on the internet of specific areas, and sometimes it's very, very difficult to find. And and in my case, also with the little computer mishap I had last week, all of my images that I had were backed up but saved from prior. And so we might have to improvise a little bit halfway through, but we'll pull it through. Are you ready to go, Alex?
I am ready.
You are ready. Okay. So the RMS Queen Mary, we're all familiar with her. This is a shot here taken in Long Beach. And when 20th Century Fox wanted to produce Irwin Allen's production of Paul Gallico's novel of the Poseidon Adventure, uh, they turned to the Queen Mary to be uh, the source for not only the design of the ship, but also uh, uh, used for onboard during film shoots as well. Of course, Paul Gallico's novel was based upon his experience sailing aboard the Queen Mary, and so it was only fitting that the Queen Mary would become the the backdrop, I guess, for the main role of the movie. Uh, Let me go here to the next shot really quick. When I was a tour guide in 1996, we had the bungee cord jump built on the side of the ship there on the wharf. And one of the things that we used to tell people was that this was left over from 20th Century Fox on how they turned the Queen Mary upside down to film the movie. And you wouldn't believe how many people actually fell for that joke. Uh, some people are a little naive, but it happens. But yeah, this is a shot taken probably about 1996, 1997. Uh, it was funny to say, that's for sure.
Oh my
So here we not have the Queen Mary, but we have the SS Poseidon. Now, the SS Poseidon we know didn't exist, but it did exist in model form. It was a 21 and a half foot long model. We thought, or I thought actually, that usually when you do movies, especially a disaster film where you're going to destroy the model, that you build multiple models. You build a model, for the before shots, and then you build a model, for the destruction shots. No, they built one model, 21 and a half feet long, little over a ton in weight, was electrically powered with on the screws. It had operating radar arrays that spun around. Uh, and so when you see in the movie the ship upside down explosions coming out of her funnels. Uh, that's the same model, and it's the same model that's sitting in the Los Angeles Maritime Museum today, which we'll take a look at here in a minute. Oops, well, I went real quick on that one. So some more screenshots here of her at sea. You can see that she is propelling in the water. This was all filmed at the 20th Century lot on a giant man-made lake, which is the same source where they had for uh, the tsunami wave scene, and we'll see some pictures of that here in a minute. And she was lit, and she had smoke generators in the funnels.
As I recall, that was a very convincing scene, actually.
It
When I
was.
saw it, I was like, "Oh, that looks so real."
I was reading about the model, and normally, I guess, I think it was A.L. Abbott, I believe, was the master modeler for 20th Century Studios, and he had retired, but they brought him back to do the model building for the Poseidon. And normally, I guess, in all of the experience he had in the past was um, he did a lot of World War II films, so they built a lot of like battleships and cruisers and stuff that they had to do, scenes where they're sailing in the water. And their normal size for modeling is 1/16th scale, 3/4 of an inch to a foot. That's a huge. That would be a huge model to build, but the accuracy would show up in on the camera. And he actually made the suggestion of going to O scale. It's actually 1/48th scale, so it's only 21 and a half feet long. You can imagine it would be almost like 70 feet in length. If it was 3/4 of an inch. Uh, the reason for that was that 20th Century Fox had a 32-foot long green screen tank. So all of the upside down scenes were filmed in a studio in an enclosed tank. So they could actually get divers in there and control the situation. And they had a green screen in the background, so they could put any kind of a background they wanted in the underwater scenes. Uh, and we were going to see that here in just a minute. But it makes sense why they went with that. Over here, we're going to just take a peek at the tidal wave really quick, or tsunami, I should say tsunami. This was a seismologic event, as opposed to like a rogue wave. Uh, this is the scene that made it in the movie. Found out that they had done 3 separate tidal wave shots, and the first one completely devoured the ship. It was like the ship just suddenly disappeared. It was not able to be used in a film. So they cut out. They had 2 1,200-gallon tanks that would rush out, quickly to create the wave, and that was too much water. So they cut it in half. They went and used 1 1,200-gallon tank, and that wasn't enough. So then they had to kind of equal it out. But they did it in three separate shots.
Wow.
Absolutely amazing. So here we have the model of the SS Poseidon, which is at the LA Maritime Museum in San Pedro, Los Angeles Harbor. And remember, I was saying that this is the same model that was used during all the destruction scenes and the underwater scenes. So when you look at this model, you'll notice that there's a few little ouches, little wowies, bent handrails. Of course, people can come up and touch this now, so that probably doesn't help either. But you can see that there's some uh, uh, deformations in the superstructure. Things aren't quite right. Things don't quite line up right, and that's probably all from the damage that had been done. But still, it's still a very, very impressive model. Here we see the forward section of the superstructure. If you'll notice, they modeled the ship after her appearance in Long Beach years. You'll see here on sun deck, you've got the large upper windows. Let's see if I can zoom in here. Yeah, the large vertical windows that were not original to the ship. Those were added during the conversion in 68 to 71.
The originals were like small squares, right?
Correct. Yeah, that original forward section of sun deck was actually for non-Cunard personnel, like the managers of the Bank of England, uh, the ship's photographers. Um, yeah, I can't remember all who was in there, but they were. I think they were standard cabins. I don't know how much. I've never seen photographs of them, and they were all gutted in during the conversion, unfortunately. Go back, and they tried to go very very accurate to how the Queen Mary appeared, in her Long Beach years, um, including you've got the radio directional finder antenna. You've got the searchlights on either end. You can see the two short range and long range radar arrays up at the top.
It's a pretty impressive model considering, it was all made, especially just from seeing photographs and stuff and maybe having a few blueprints, but
I agree. I agree. And the fact that it was motorized. I mean, the fact that this thing could
yeah.
move in water was. You can see here that the docking bridge has a little bit of a problem, but but still, with all the aft docking machinery, the steering room skylight visible there, they the detail was very very impressive. And we also know so uh, Tyler Frederick was making the comment about how why wasn't the Poseidon? Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Why the Poseidon was not an RMS, and we do know that she was British flagged because we can see that on her stern we do see Liverpool as her port of registry. But the simple fact is that uh, Royal Mail only designated certain ships to be RMS. They were um, usually staffed by Royal Mail mail sorters. You had you didn't just ship mail, but you also uh, processed mail and what's the word I'm looking for?
Sorted it.
You sorted it. You took letters from or postcards from passengers on board that went into sorting. So that but that's all staffed by Royal Mail. So in order to be an RMS ship, or Royal Mail would designate certain ships to be handled by uh, to handle Royal Mail, and so obviously the Queen Mary was designated RMS. The Queen Mary 2 was, I don't know, ceremoniously given the title of RMS. They don't really even operate in that fashion anymore, but she was handling Royal Mail, so they did give Queen Mary 2 the title of RMS. But in this case, who's to say what the situation was? It's a made up situation, but
Mhm.
in this case, Poseidon did not have an RMS title, as far as we know. Now, maybe it did. um, Here's another shot of the bow on the model. Uh, we can see here uh, the uh, the bridge that connects the forecastle with the forward part of A deck, right, and forward of the foremast, and that was not original. You originally had the forward cargo hold hatch there, and but in order for people to get across and not have to go down a stairway and then back up a stairway, they went ahead and built this bridge during the conversion. And then we'll see in some screenshots that there was scenes that were shot in this same area, so they had to incorporate that into the model.
That's why they put that in there, because I was thinking, I'm like, if SS Poseidon was still technically in service in that movie,
Yeah.
then that bridge would not have made sense, because then what are those 3 boom cranes at the front for
Right.
if not for
Exactly.
loading cargo?
Right. Yeah. Those are things that they figured that the audience wasn't going to really figure out.
I don't think the audience really did notice.
So when they did the shots from the bridge, this is actually the model that you see in the image here of the bow. It's not the Queen Mary. It's not a matte. It was actually a photo taken of the model itself. So here we see the model in the man-made lake at the MGM studio lot. You can see the two 1,200-gallon dump chutes over in the background. This is the 32-foot green screen tank that was in the MGM studios, and you can see the model here is in her complete capsize phase here.
Wow.
Here's a diver that's adjusting something with the funnel.
Probably loading the explosives into it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think they just used air, compressed air for the explosions, and then a red light, for the
Oh.
effect. Yeah, I don't think they actually set explosions. That would probably do a little more damage to the model than they wanted. Here's a shot, a color shot. It's funny, in some scenes you'll actually notice that the starboard side uh, lifeboats are gone, like completely gone. I don't know why that was, but I guess they figured that most of the angles were taken on the port side, so they were caring more about continuity on the port side than they were on the starboard side.
Well, wait, that's when the ship rolled over, isn't that probably because the lifeboats got knocked off when the ship
Yeah,
rolled?
but the ship got hit from the port side.
Oh, that's right.
It's kind of hard. You get a little lost, it flipped upside down. Well, yeah, we're looking at, or I guess you could say it's her starboard side upside down, but no, that's her port side. Here's another diver shot. Here's one of the explosion scenes, or at least they're testing, I guess. You can see it's basically compressed air that's coming out of the funnel. Okay, and we're gonna move on to the next set here.
I'm really excited about this, because once we start getting into the nitty gritty of the ship, it's going to be really interesting.
Okay, and we're gonna go boom. So we're gonna talk about the bridge, which is one of the first scenes in the movie. Now we're looking at one of the original deck plans. Not very much to show here, but uh, it wasn't just the wheelhouse. You did have the captain's chart room, which is directly aft on the port side, and then you had the officer's chart room on the starboard side, directly aft of the wheelhouse. Originally, above the wheelhouse, you had what's known as the compass platform. It's also known as the monkey bridge because you did have another binnacle up there, um, which would look like a monkey that was going, like this. And but the monkey, the binnacle got moved forward, and the radar arrays went in the area where you had that enclosed um, area just after the searchlights. So even I thought in the beginning that this was the Queen Mary's bridge. It looks really good. It's not the Queen Mary's bridge. We know that they did get some items from the Queen Mary to use for the set. Some items. I couldn't tell you exactly specifically which one. But probably not anything from the bridge directly. But they did go on board and measure everything, photograph everything, and then replicated it for the set, right down to uh, the Kent clear screen windows for. I mean, that looks like it's an actual working clear screen. Um, the uh, the telegraphs, the engine room telegraphs, and we'll go into some more detail here. The big difference, though, it would be the helms. The uh, the helm telemotors are not like the Queen Marys at all, and we'll see that in a minute. In this case, they've got two that are painted green, and we'll continue on with another photo here. So here's the actual Queen Mary's bridge. There's the Kent Clearview screen. We've got one of the hydraulic telemotors for helm control here. There's one over here on the left-hand side, or left of that telemotor, and then we have this little gray box, which is known as the iron mic. So we're actually 3 helms in the wheelhouse on the Queen Mary, as opposed to on the Poseidon there, we're only showing 2. And the reason why you have 2, you have 2 that are actually controlled, manual control. You always had a helmsman at the wheel, but the iron mic is actually the ship's autopilot. So there were 2 types of compasses on board. You had a regular magnetic compass, which is, there were several on board, but this is the one that's housed in this binnacle right here in the brass. But unvisible would be the Sperry gyro compass, which was a little more accurate. And those would have the main gyro compass would send a signal to what they would call repeaters that would be reading your direction. And this is a repeater right here. There were 2 repeaters, one on either, and you can actually even see that it says Sperry. And right there on top is also a repeater, and that is actually what you can set your control to. So if you want to set a heading of do you want to go dead west 270? That's where you would set the heading 270. The iron mic would steer the ship and keep a heading of 270. I have suspicions that the binnacle, the one that I had just shown in this binnacle, oops, I did it again. The binnacle that was in that previous shot is actually either from the monkey bridge, the compass platform above the wheelhouse, or it's from the docking bridge. I think it's the same one that was been on display on D deck for years. And the reason why I say that is because if we go back, we can look at this binnacle, and there is no voice tube. But the binnacle that was above the wheelhouse and the binnacle that was on the docking bridge had a voice tube. And we'll see here. Let's see here. Well, we'll get to another shot in a minute. I'll point out the voice tube. Some other things that are of interest is here's a fathometer. It makes perfect sense that you have an officer reading the gauge on the fathometer. You are in Greek coastal waters. You have underwater volcanoes. You have sudden peaks of shallowness that a ship could possibly run aground on. You are going to be constantly looking at that fathometer. The Queen Mary had, I don't want to say had a fathometer all through her life, but she had some way of measurement of bottom measurement. Mainly, first it was for uh, in port, just to be used in port. But when this fathometer was probably installed during the war, and we'll see the Queen Mary's fathometer in a minute.
Seems like they were really making the bridge of the Poseidon pretty accurate.
Oh, I mean, beyond like what you would think that they would even go to to make it look somewhat real. I mean, they went above and beyond what what would be required. Now, this is not the one on the Queen Mary, but they pretty much all look alike. This is a fathometer from a naval vessel, but we can see Queen Mary's fathometer right there.
Wow.
Loudophones. They were amplified telephone systems that reached throughout the ship between the wheelhouse and the engine room, between the wheelhouse and the boiler rooms, between the engine room and the boiler rooms, between the engine room and uh, I think the steering room. Um, there were a lot
Turbo
of phones.
generator
Yeah,
room.
turbo generator room. Right, exactly. And I believe that they actually got a bunch of loudophones that were removed from areas of the ship that had been gutted, because that sure does look like a loud that came from the Queen Mary, and there's a lot of others that I'll point out that definitely look Queen Mary original. Um, Here we have the watertight door indicator panel. This is almost identical to the actual one on the Queen Mary. The only difference between Poseidon's and the Queen Mary's is hers is mounted right here on the center line, and the Queen Mary's is actually over on the port side, and we'll see that here in a second. Um, these little Loudophone speaker boxes, I also think came from the Queen Mary. There's one almost identical to it in the steering room on the port side. It's got the same grill. If it's not one from the ship, they sure did copy it pretty good. Oh,
Jeez.
and there is the voice tube right there on the binnacle on the right hand side. The tube that
So you
comes up
just
and you have the funnel. Yeah, you just put your mouth in there and you can yell into that tube.
you said something about like you whistled into it, right?
Well,
So there was a
I don't know if these have the whistles. It's the tubes out on the docking wings that have the little whistles on them, and then you've got the little hail funnels here overhead. Those came from the docking wings and from the compass platform up above. So here's the Queen Mary's watertight door indicator panel, almost identical.
wow.
And this is right on on the port side near the door that leads into the wheelhouse.
Wow.
And we have Robin Shelby, played by Eric Shea, who's needing to grab on for dear life onto that column, and we'll see right behind him is a rebometer. Now there were rebometers in the engine rooms, and there were rebometers on the bridge, and this reads basically a forward direction to the right, zero in the middle, and then a stern direction to the left. This is what's telling you the revolutions per minute of the propeller shafts. This being here, I would assume would probably be. It shouldn't be there, but would probably be like the outer shaft. The only problem is that it's reading zero. So I don't know why it's reading zero, but it is. The Queen Mary's rebometers in the bridge were actually forward on the port and starboard side, and they're stacked on top of each other. So we have the outer port side on top on the port, and the inner port on the port side, and then the starboards are on the starboard side. and I'll explain a little bit more how they work. And here's another shot of the Queen Mary's original bridge. Now you can see the two telemotors there on either side. There's that voice tube. It just kind of pops up everywhere. Um, right here on that forward bulkhead is this. Well, it's blank 72. It should probably read 072. And the Queen Mary had the same little placard holder. This is the course heading of the ship. So they would change that if course was changed, the numbers would change, and this would tell the helmsman you're steering a course of 072, which is basically what, east? Yeah, you're almost east northeast. Oh, yeah, and that was the other thing about the Kent Clearview screens. There's a Kent Clearview screen, and all it is just a plate of glass that spins around so that the water can't accumulate on the glass itself. So as you get raindrops on the main part of the side light window there, the center part would actually be completely clear. And it's also usually heated, electrically heated, to prevent condensation.
It's a genius thing when you think about it.
It is. Looking again here on the Poseidon, we have the master chronometer.
What's that?
That is the system that would set all the clocks on the entire ship.
Oh, I see.
All the clocks are controlled by this master chronometer. The Queen Mary's master chronometer was actually in the chart room aft of the wheelhouse. It wasn't on the in the wheelhouse itself. But they decided to incorporate it into the set.
That's crazy. That's one of those details that you really didn't need in the set.
Exactly.
But
I know. Let's see. Was there anything else? Let's see. Okay. Yeah, I don't think so. Now, radar was not an original 1936 item that was brought on board. That was something that was brought on board during World War II, and it changed multiple times over, you know, from immediately after World War II and into the 50s and the 60s. The systems, improved. The technology improved. So the systems on the ship were constantly advanced. The Queen Mary actually had a column in the center line of the wheelhouse that had a screen. The one that's visible in the wheelhouse today is not original to the ship, but it was there when 20th Century Fox got their idea and they incorporated it into the set. And there's that Loudphone speaker box that I was talking about, almost virtually identical as one in the steering room back on E deck aft. Another interesting thing that they put in was, here is the emergency steering room telegraph. I mean, they put the engine room telegraphs in, but this is the emergency steering room telegraph. So if you lost helm control on the main bridge, you could control the ship steering-wise. You could control the ship from the steering room near the rudder. But you obviously needed to have somebody on the bridge to say, okay, come to port 10 degrees, whatever. And so all these controls were set by this telegraph to, there's the actual steering room telegraph on the Queen Mary. And that was sent to the steering room telegraph in the emergency steering room. And again, another Sperry gyro compass repeater, and a helm control telemotor. All right, next set.
Yeah, it's really amazing just how much of the detail was put into the bridge of the Poseidon when it just really didn't need to be there. I
Yeah,
mean, you'd think like it's a movie, they'd try to save some money and whatever, but I think really there was a sense of like pride in what they were making with that film.
yeah,
It wasn't just like some disaster movie. I think they actually really did love what they were creating.
yeah. I agree. So I'm sure everybody recognizes this is the very first scene we see on board when the movie begins, and in beyond the wording is Robin Shelby, who is attempting to try and get up from sun deck up to sports deck, and then from sports deck he'll go up to the wheelhouse. So this is actually on the Queen Mary here, with wind generators and spraying hoses for water effect, and yeah, but it was actually a sunny day, and there's some shots here I'll show you where you can kind of see the sunlight. But yeah, he's trying to fight through the wind up the staircase here, and we can see him climbing up. We can see the Queen Mary's funnels. So here's the stairway that he's climbing up, right there on the port side of Sun Deck. That is not the original staircase. This was added during the conversion 6871. Uh, it's wider. It's not as steep. It has um, a platform, that where you can, a landing uh, midway up. This was, because it's a lot easier for the general public to be able um, to use than the original wooden staircase that was there. So he would be coming up this little spot here, coming up on the sports deck, and then he would make his way over to this little staircase over here on the left-hand side that would lead up to the wheelhouse. Here's another shot of the one on sports sun deck going up to sports deck here. And I don't think, yeah, the lifeboat is blocking the one from the wheelhouse. Now you can see it's a little sunny, but they've added filters and all that to try and make it look like it's stormy outside. But here he is up on the uh, wheelhouse deck here, and he's made it up this staircase. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. We can see the original on the left-hand corner here is one of the original wooden staircases that's no longer there that leads up to the compass platform.
Mm.
And there's where he was actually coming up from the from
Oh
sports deck.
yeah, that's where he was standing in that last shot.
Right. Another shot of that same staircase. Okay, so let's see. Now, why did I bring this up? Oh, of course I brought this up. That's not the right one. That figures. That is not the right deck.
Really?
No, that's A deck. Shouldn't be A deck.
Oh.
Now let's see. We'll move on. I think I can move on with this. Oh, yes, it is. It is A deck. We wanted to talk about A deck. So yeah, it's in the incorrect order. So we'll go back. So we do have the scene on the bow with Reverend Scott and I can't remember what his other name is. The other Reverend that was accompanying him, having a discussion out on the well deck of A deck, and he is going to be. Here's another shot here, and I'll show you. Remember we had talked about the bridge that connects the forecastle from main deck across. There's the bridge right behind them there, and the staircase that leads up is the staircase that they did add Not original because it's not as sturdy or not as steep as the original, but leads up to the forecastle there. There's the bridge today.
With a little abandoned snack stand.
You're right, exactly. Yeah, you can see where the original forward cargo hold hatch used to be. Yeah, the little churro stand. It was very obvious why they put a canvas tarp in the background so that they could hide the Long Beach cityscape shot. See a shot of them out on the bow looking aft there. This door that's behind them leads into a men's restroom that was built in Long Beach here. But actually, it's the way that you can get into the warping machinery room. You know, the forgotten, abandoned machinery space that they didn't know existed. It's right through that bathroom with a connecting door inside that everybody knew existed.
Yeah.
So they would be out here on this deck. That's where that conversation was taking place. You can see the staircase that leads up to the forecastle, and there's the bridge. And they're coming up this little staircase here on the main deck. And there's the staircase that they're coming up.
It's so interesting how they were able to film it from just certain angles just to prevent you from seeing Long Beach in the background.
Exactly. In fact, if you look at certain shots, you can actually kind of see a little bit of Long Beach, but it's so brief. Oh, well, actually, oh, never mind. Nope, never mind. Yeah, you had to get the right frame out, and it was really difficult to try and catch that particular frame.
Mhm.
And we're looking aft here on main deck, and these are the there were heavy shell doors that would actually make this a completely watertight area. So when you had rough weather, you didn't flood the interior part of the ship. Um, but right there would lead into the main deck garden lounge, which is the
Mhm.
Mauritania room today, along with that porthole there. And that's going back to the last voyage on the Queen Mary. There's the same spot. So let's see. The next one's going to be the scene where he is giving, where Reverend Scott is giving his Sunday services, and
Mm.
that is right here in this spot of the dome of the first class lounge. This is the dome here in the center, and uh, let's see if we can pull that out. We'll go to the. Now he's standing on actually, and I wish I was trying to find photographs to show this. He's actually in a spot where the superstructure is split because he's at an expansion joint. So he's on a railing that's a little higher up, and he's looking aft at everybody sitting in chairs, and he has to go down a little staircase, but it's more like a staircase bridge because it connects to the next section of superstructure, he's going over an expansion joint is what he's doing. But I couldn't find a photograph to really show that. But you can see here, there's a railing right there, and
Mhm.
this is the aft portion of from that expansion joint, and that black area right above it is looking at that forward section from that expansion joint, and there's the staircase right there.
Yeah.
And by the way, I believe that's an original lectern.
Oh yeah, that does look like it's.
Yeah, I think I've got
Wow.
a better shot of it, but the silvered bronze fittings and everything, and the wood paneling that's on it, it looks original.
I also noticed in the last shot you could see smoke coming out of the funnel.
Yes, yes, yeah. I think I've got some other shots of that, but so here we are looking aft in that area. There were games and stuff that you can still see that are painted on the deck. Um, shuffleboard and uh, rings. But we have here the windows to the dome section of the first class lounge. And originally there were steel deadlight covers that would actually close over those, that you would want to keep closed in bad weather. They removed them for some reason, and then they realized that was a bad idea because when you have events in the Queen's Salon today, and you need to darken the room for for some kind of a film presentation or a slideshow, PowerPoint, um, you can't cut the light. So now they've kind of covered them over with sheet metal.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, in fact, this is the only shot I could find, but this is the same location today. The windows are covered over. You can kind of
Oh
see a
wow.
little bit. Yeah,
Is that photo is taken at Long Beach?
yeah,
Oh, I see. So that's after they removed the covers of the windows, or is
yeah.
that
Well,
before?
the steel deadlights were gone during the conversion, and
I see.
then once they realized that they had made a mistake and didn't have the ability to darken those windows, they just permanently darkened them. Yeah,
Oh wow.
yeah. But I wish I could have found a better picture, but it was the only one I could find, and I didn't have any in my collection for some reason. This hatch here on the left-hand side is actually the access to the dome. Uh, you can get into the overhead of the dome on in the lounge, and there's also there's a ventilation trunk that's in there as well.
It appears to be unlocked as well in that shot.
Yeah, not surprised. Oh, there's a better shot of that lectern.
Oh yeah, that's definitely original.
Yeah, and here he is going back up that staircase again. This staircase actually leads down to Sun Deck. Um, I believe it was replaced later. That's an original staircase, but it was replaced with a steel one later. So we're gonna go back now, kind of going back a little bit into the film, but here we've got Mr. Martin going out for his morning jog, and he's coming out of these doors here. This is actually the forward section of port side sun deck. In fact, we can see the staircase that Robin Shelby was trying to get up to go to the bridge. This actually leads today to what was a display area. I don't even know what what they were using it for up until Urban Commons closed. Do you remember what was in that area in 2020?
Well, we were there and it was completely closed off, so I don't think they had any current exhibits.
That's what I
What
thought.
I what I do know is the exhibit wasn't open, but I think that they still had the Diana dresses there.
Hmm.
Because as far as I know, when the ship closed, they still had the Diana dresses there, and the
Ah,
owners of those dresses were trying to get them.
yeah, that makes sense. All right, move on. So there's the same staircase today.
And that staircase is not original either, is it?
No, no, it's not. No, this was all first class. Well, it was first class, then it became third class cabins, and those were all gutted during the 68-71 conversion. I'm going to try and speed up here a little bit because we are running a little behind schedule. Here we are looking aft on the sun deck. Same staircase that Mr. Martin was coming down on. I'm going to go back to Mr. Martin, and he's going to... Oh, now, why did I put that back there? Oh, there we go. Okay, so yeah, so he's making his little way down. That staircase that is behind him that's enclosed actually leads down to prom deck, and that's all still there, original today. And he makes his way all the way aft. In fact, he has made himself so far aft that this is the aft enclosed staircase, that little wooden door that's open with the round window. That leads onto the aft section of portside prom deck. And these stairs that are identical to the ones that he came down on, these lead to what they call the executive offices on sun deck. They're on sun deck aft, just forward of the veranda grill.
And those are not original deck chairs, are they?
I believe they're not. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think the armrests on the originals were curved downward.
Yeah. Yeah, right, exactly. But they're nice looking deck chairs.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind owning one.
Yeah.
Now, what is interesting is that that's the same staircase that the Rosens are in front of, but it's obviously taken at a different time. Okay, next set.
Pretty exciting.
So we've moved down to main deck. We're one deck below prom deck. We're on main deck, and this is what is today, or what was originally, the Travel Bureau. This is where passengers would go if they wanted to make future bookings, future sailings. They could even make hotel reservations. This is where any kind of travel needs that they needed, this is where they would go. And it's set up a little bit for a display, until the ship closed. But I wanted to point out this little glass divider. We're actually looking inside the Travel Bureau, and there was a glass little this little panel divider on either side of the door that leads into the Travel Bureau, and this is one of them here. So we're going to go to the next set, and we're looking at the other side, and there's one exactly like it over behind the glass there. You can see it a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
So this is what the Travel Bureau looks like today. That's not supposed to be there. We'll go past that. No, that's definitely not supposed to be there. There we go. Okay. So here we go. We've got the ship's doctor and nurse, which, by the way, the nurse is Sheila Allen. That was Irwin Allen's wife that's playing the nurse. You can see that same glass divider panel there behind the door glass. We also want to take a look at the fact that this was filmed before the hotel opened. The hotel wouldn't open until 73. But at this time, the original flooring is still completely visible and looks like really good condition.
Wow. And that flooring is probably post-war flooring, right?
Yeah, it would be post-war flooring, yeah.
And the lights you were saying to me before.
Yes, right. So they didn't convert the lighting to fluorescent until about 1980, 81, somewhere around there. From the time that the ship opened in Long Beach until that time, all the lighting still remained incandescent. In some cases, it was still using original light bulbs, 220-volt light bulbs running on 110 volts. So they were dim. They were half as bright as they would normally be. They had the stock of light bulbs, so they decided to use them. Makes sense. But we can see here that that's incandescent lighting in the overhead lights there.
Wow.
Another interesting thing is I was hearing a thing about the actors were very good at pretending that the ship was rolling, even though the obviously the ship is not rolling because we know she doesn't roll. But take a look at this guy back here walking down the corridor. Oh shoot! Ah! So he is walking straight, perfectly, normal, and everybody here is all standing up perfectly normal. But we go to the next shot. The doctor is leaning to his left, and the guy in the back is also leaning to his left. It's all timed perfectly with the roll.
Yeah, and the camera is tilted
And
as
the
well.
camera is tilted. Right, exactly, yeah. So they're heading aft on the starboard side of main deck here, and this is the only cabin that was actually somewhat seen in the movie. They're going to the Rogo's cabin, played by Ernest Borgnine and um, oh gosh, I can't think of her name now.
I can't help you there.
Oh shoot! Well, it'll come back to me in a minute. That wasn't really all that important. I wasn't thinking of actors' names, but they're coming to what today is known as M005. We can actually see the original um, cabin number of M45 right there on the bulkhead. And
M45 is what it was when Queen Mary was in service, right?
correct, correct. The numbers of all the cabins had to change, not for the sake of changing them, but it was for the telephone system. GTE came in and said, okay, we've got to establish a four digit extension for every cabin. So they decided, okay, well, whatever the cabin letter is will be the first number. So you've got ABC is two, right? Is it two is ABC? Because I think one is not. I can't remember. It's been I don't pay attention to the letters on the phone, but nonetheless, M had to be the first designation of the four-digit extension, and uh, so M was fine. But um, you have A deck and B deck, uh, and then yeah, you have A deck and B deck that would go beyond nine. Let's see, between they ran out of extensions, so this is the reason why B deck has 200 and 400 series numbers, and because it still had to use A and B. A and B is the same first number. Um, I'm getting away from myself here.
Well, Tyler wants to know really quick
Yeah.
where he can find this cabin.
So if you go down the main staircase from prom deck from the main hall, and you're facing forward when you come down to main deck, you'll turn right to your starboard side, and you'll continue to go aft on that passageway. In fact, we'll go back one picture here. See, there's the travel
Travel
bureau,
Bureau.
right? And they are simply just making a turn right here to his left, and they're right at the cabin. And that cabin door is still there. And what's very interesting is that these are the only cabin doors that are oak burl doors. All other cabin doors on the ship are all like, light paneled, grain paneled doors, but not burl. And they don't have the silvered bronze door jambs. These have silvered bronze door jambs. Um, Unfortunately, M005 is really not a cabin anymore. It was originally an inside cabin, a single person cabin, and uh, uh, Martha Chacon, who used to have her shop on the Queen Mary, she used to run the Queen Mary store on in Main Hall and the Portside Necessities on our deck. Her storage room uh, was M005. There's nothing really much in there anymore. But the opposite side, the exact same cabins, the spa, the Queen Mary Spa occupies.
Hmm.
So you have M003, M001, and then M005. When you go aft from this section, they start in the 100s. They go M101, M102, M103. And then and then forward from here they go M107, M007, M009, M0011, and they go forward, up as you go forward. So everything goes up as you go away from the main foyer here. And that's the same on A deck and B deck as well.
Jeez. Seems confusing to me.
The door. So we're in there in the Rogo's cabin really quick, and there's not original cabin, but they did get stuff from the Queen Mary, including a Punkaluber. But the interesting thing about this Punkaluber is it's not a wall Punkaluber, it's a ceiling Punkaluber that just ended up becoming a wall Punkaluber and a coat hanger apparently. They look like they got other other hardware from the ship. That looks like a Roanoid quarter circle handrail for the bathroom. The medicine cabinets look like they might be from the Queen Mary.
So this is a set piece.
Yes, this is a set.
And they recreated the burled door?
Yeah, they created it exact.
Wow.
In fact, so we now we're going to go to the Shelby cabin. We've got Susan Shelby and Robin Shelby here, and they got the same burl door. See?
Wow.
Let's see here.
They even have the electric fans on the
Queen
wall.
Mary fan. Yep, that's a Queen Mary fan. And I wanted to point out these diffuser panels that are hiding the open porthole. See, there's like a glass panel that's there, and not every first class cabin had it. Oh, wait. Oh, that's what was in the beginning. Let's see if I can go back to the beginning. That's what. Yeah, they were out of order. So this is a bad one. But see, this cabin had the diffuser panels, and they are hidden in the wall here. And you had cranks that would actually crank them up, so you could. So you didn't actually have to see the horizon, because watching the horizon going up and down can often make you seasick. So
yeah.
And if you had the deadlights on, in a lot of cases they were lit. So you had artificial lighting in the back. You bring the diffusers up, so it looked like you still had daylight, but you actually have artificial light. But the interesting thing is that those diffuser panels, those glass diffuser panels, are still all in there. And if you can get your fingers inside the little hole, or if sometimes they put a little piece of wood over it, but if it's missing, you can actually pull the glass up. It's dirty, but you can pull them up. All right, then we'll go to the next set.
One of those things we probably shouldn't encourage people to do.
maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. Okay.
Tyler, we already answered your question, just so you know. You might have missed it, but we did. We answered your question.
Okay, so I wanted to pull this up first and get rid of this. By the way, thank you for looking at the chat. I haven't had a chance to look at it in a while.
I'm looking. Obviously we only have time to answer questions that, have something to do with the thing, but yeah.
So I'll be perfectly honest. The Queen Mary and the Poseidon are nowhere related as far as how their arrangements are, how their decks are. But our deck is noteworthy because the main first class dining room, actually all three class dining rooms, were all on our deck. It made perfect sense because you are closer to the level of the water, so you didn't have as much movement from side to side, and you're also center in the ship in the first class dining room, so you didn't have as much pitch forward and aft. So our deck was the perfect place to put the dining rooms. This is where I would assume that the dining room of the Poseidon is supposed to be positioned. Um, the Queen Mary was an inspiration for the dining room in the Poseidon, not just for the Queen Mary's first class dining room, but also the first class lounge. And I just wanted to show this. These are not in order, so I'm just trying to make do. This is one of the bronze sculptures that was in the first class lounge. There were four of them, one in each corner, forward and aft of the lounge. And we'll take a look here. Oop, nope. Well, let's go past that a second.
Wrong movie.
Yeah. Well, no, there's a reason for it.
Yeah,
But they incorporated the statues into the set, or statue-like figurines into the set. So you will see these here. Um, I will go back. So it's kind of a mush, a merge of the first class lounge and the first class dining room of the Queen Mary that became the dining room of the Poseidon. Um,
even those
the
columns look familiar shape
Yeah,
from.
the columns are kind of similar to the ones that are in the first class lounge, and the uh, the glass skylights. They're not really skylights, but the glass lit faux skylights uh, also came from the first class lounge. Although she had six and these had three. This lighting, by the way, that goes around the first class lounge actually had that lighting in there. It doesn't work anymore, but there was lighting that was recessed, and I'll see if I can show it to you. But the other thing that I wanted to point out was part of the set of the dining room of the Poseidon is reused sets. These
What?
these gilded panels that you see all throughout the room, these Egyptian gilded panels, they're all over the place. There's one there. There's part of I think there might be part of one there. Those all came from the movie Cleopatra. There's part of one back there. So they were reused 20th Century Fox sets. There's
Oh my gosh.
yeah,
I
you can
had
see.
no idea.
Yeah,
But wasn't Cleopatra an early 60s movie?
yeah, 62, I believe.
Oh my gosh.
So they were sitting around on MGM for what 10 years, and then
Yeah.
you can tell that they needed to be regilded. They were touched up. Um, the other thing that was inspired from the first class lounge was the lighting urns. You'll see the lighting urns in the dining room on the Poseidon. Let's see. So we'll move on. Now, there's another gilded panel.
Yeah, I've had so many people tell me that, that oh, the dining room of Poseidon Adventure was actually the Queen Mary, and I'm like, it wasn't.
Yeah.
It looks nothing.
Yeah. Nope. Not quite. And the big difference is the fact that you have these raised sections of deck on the outside edges of the dining room, whereas the Queen Mary never had anything like that. You can see him actually going up one of the steps. He's on one of those little raised areas. There's another one of those statues that I was trying to point out. Um, but now going away from the inspiration of the first class lounge, we have the inspiration of the first class dining room with the bronze doors, the main centerpiece doors that are aft in the first class dining room on the Queen Mary are copied here. And this is the only shot of looking aft in the Poseidon's dining room. All the other scenes will all be looking forward. They drag the Christmas tree from this forward end to the aft end to get up to go up with Acres up into the galley. But yeah, it's the only shot where you see forward in the dining room. And the
Wow.
interesting thing is that they put the stage. Oops, they put the stage on one side, not at the end of the room, but on the side of the room. So um this would be the port side.
What's interesting too is I noticed that room appears to be the same dimensions as Queen Mary's first class main lounge, but not her dining room.
Right, right. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, it's a little narrow. It's a little narrow. I take it back. I guess this was also a forward shot. You can see the bronze doors there. Um, no, that's all I'm going to say. No, there was no laudophone attached to the captain's table in the first class dining room on the Queen Mary, but it made good for the movie. Um, let's see. There was no. Okay. Oh, I did want to point out that they did copy a lot of what was what you see in most dining rooms on in big restaurants, but also on cruise ships. You have lots of pantry stations. So I mean, they went to the extent of creating little pantry stations and you know all over the place. You can see the waiter in the background is at a pantry station.
Mm-hmm.
Um, oh golly, yep. I should have actually had his name written down. The actor that was uh, Susan Shelby's accompaniment here at the table is actually the same person who falls to his death in the skylight. He was just
Oh,
a regular actor who needed extra money, and when they were looking for a stunt man to do the stunt, he volunteered, and he actually got into stunt work later on. He just died a couple of years ago. God, I should pull his name up. But he was on the Queen Mary in 19 no in 2005. 2005 they had a Poseidon Adventure reunion. Ronald Neame, the director, this actor, and the woman that actually did the dubbed singing voice for um, Carol Lindley when she sings the morning after is not actually Carol Lindley singing. It's this singer that they had hired to do the dubbing for, and she actually sang for us. We could tell. Oh yeah, that's definitely the voice.
jeez, look at the ruffles on the front of
Oh,
his.
I know the fringe. No, I wouldn't wear fringe today. So we're looking forward now in the dining room, and you can see the little covered shelters where they will actually put the Christmas tree up to get in and leads into the galley. Oh, and there's the bronze doors that we were talking about earlier, but for the Queen Mary.
Queen Mary.
Okay. All right. Next set.
Yeah, that is definitely some, you know, the sets from Cleopatra being reused. That I did not know. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool. So is everybody in the chat still watching? Are you enjoying? I think it's pretty interesting to see all this stuff.
Yeah. I was just reading Mike's comment about those doors are beautiful. Those doors are beautiful, and it's so forgotten about. They lead to nowhere today. They It's like the Winchester Mystery House. Doors that lead to nowhere, and a partial staircase that leads to nowhere now.
You know, they could include that as part of their haunted tour. Why did they install this? It was to keep the ghosts in,
To confuse the ghosts, to
to
confuse them.
confuse the
Yeah.
ghosts.
Um. So I'm not I'm not an expert on tsunamis, but I can tell you pretty much that a tsunami itself, especially one that's created by a seismic disturbance and ground undersea disturbance. Uh, they travel fast, but they don't appear. They're kind of more like a ripple, in the deep ocean. They only become large, massive in height when they start reaching shore, when they start getting into shallow water. And so I would be safe to assume that the Poseidon was near shallow water when this was taking effect. So we're looking at the binoculars of, from the when Captain Harrison was looking at the wave for the
Plus,
first time.
earlier we saw the officer looking at the fathometer.
Yes, that's right. Right. Yeah. So we know that they were dealing with shallow waters, and they're so shallow that it's actually cresting. um, so they must have been really near an island. That would be my guess.
They must have run aground.
That would have been their best bet. They should have run aground. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I forget who it was that asked me about, did the Queen Mary have a klaxon system? And I'm still trying to find out all the details to the klaxon system that the Queen Mary had. But yes, she did have a klaxon. Um,
What
uh,
is a klaxon system?
well, a klaxon would be any kind of noise, alert. It's usually a ringing bell, a siren, um, or a combination of all. But it's just like a general alarm.
Now, I don't remember the movie too well at this point, but when he turns that knob, what sound is that when the horns go honk
Yeah,
honk honk?
yeah, yeah. So he goes, yeah, that, and then that rings bells.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what the why they would have been separate controls, but yeah. But see, you would have had different alarms for different meanings. Whether it was fire, fire would have meant would have had one distinct uh, sound. Um, Obviously, sinking would probably be, a flooding situation would be another distinct sound. Um, you know, I, I don't know all the details to the Queen Mary's original klaxon system, but I'm trying to research it. I wanted to try and get it to say something here, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Um, Radio room, not really, you know, showing what the Queen Mary's original radio room was like. But um, an interesting note is the fact that the Queen Mary, in her upper deck crew areas, particularly like the officers' quarters, they all had these wood shutters. So they incorporated these wood shutters into this set. And again, there's another one of those Loudophone speaker boxes. I think that pieces of things got taken from off of one set, and then they created another set and they got transported. Not a
Yeah.
bad looking radio room, but yeah, nothing original from the Queen Mary. And we see the wave coming, breaking through. I did want to point out though that the initial turn, or when he ordered hard left, um, the turn itself is actually making the ship roll. The wave is not making the ship start to roll. The turn is making the ship start to roll. And in fact, that actually happened on the Queen Mary. Uh, Somebody had adjusted a valve in the steering room that closed a hydraulic line, and it made the ram cylinder, move to where the rudder made a sudden, hard turn. And yeah, I think there were even some injuries on board, but it has happened before. But when the ship is ordered to make a hard turn like that, um, the ship will lean to the outside of the turn, and it can be rather disturbing. So that didn't help actually in the roll, because the tidal wave, they should have turned the bow into the wave a lot sooner. Than they knew that the bow, or that the wave was off their port bow. They needed to start making the turn to port to aim the bow more directly in line with the, perpendicular to the wave. Why he
Mhm.
didn't make that order, but we can't argue. It's a movie.
It was the 70s, lots of drugs.
Yeah. Oh, that's it. Okay. It's all that. It's all the LSD that they did. Here they are, still holding on. This is pre-wave actually. I just wanted to point that out. This is pre-wave, before the ship actually gets hit, and so this is all from reaction of the ship making the sudden turn to port. So here we see again the ship getting hit by the wave. Continuing on that roll. Oh, and there's another one of those statues. See,
Oh
like
yeah.
the bronze statues, and a pantry station right there next to it. Now she's past 45 degrees. She's almost like at she's almost like at 75 degrees, almost 90, and yeah, she's beyond hope of she would have just continued to roll. I wanted to catch the piano falling. The piano in the first class lounge was anchored to the uh, the stage. However, those connections can fail, and they did. When the Queen Mary was at sea in a rough storm, the piano actually did become dislodged, and it destroyed the lounge. Um, Ralph Rushton talked about that in 1959, I believe. Just while the ship was rolling from port to starboard, the piano was just going from port to starboard, mowing down all the furniture, all the tables. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me in the fact that the piano here, lost its connection to the deck. And the people have pointed out, why are there chairs still on the ceiling or on the floor, upside down? Uh, Alex, do you know?
Yeah, because at least on the Queen Mary and a lot of other ships, they were tied to the floor with ropes. There were hooks at the bottom of the rope, but they
Exactly.
were hooked to the floor
You
for
got it.
specifically for reasons just like this, where the
You,
ship starts rolling in the rough weather and you don't want the furniture to go tumbling.
yep, you got it. That's it exactly.
They don't have that on cruise ships anymore because of the
No.
stabilization.
Here we see another chair. Yeah, somebody's pointed that out. Like, boy, they made a mistake. I don't know why they had chairs stay to the floor. I'm like, well, and we see the guy falling to his death in the skylight.
Yeah.
The ship makes a rollover. Lights are still on, but as you can expect, everything pretty much fails, and she goes to battery lighting, so she goes dark. Now, there's the rope.
Yep.
Perfect example of the rope. Yeah, tied to a little
Is that,
eye hook on the deck.
is that green shag carpeting?
Yes, it's green shag carpeting. It's olive
God,
green. Everybody
no.
loved olive green at that time. I don't know why. It's horrible color.
I hate those earthy colors of the 1970s. I can't
Yeah,
stand them.
I know. People used to get appliances, all their refrigerator and stove and oven and everything in olive green or that mustard yellow. And God. So we see acres now. This would be the aft port side. God, I gotta flip myself around. Yes, the port side of aft
I,
port. Golly, never mind.
or forward.
It doesn't really. I think actually aft starboard side of. No, it is aft port. Yeah, no, aft port side
But if
leading
it
into
was
the
aft,
galley.
then the bronze doors would be there in the center.
Yes, that's right. They would be but this is on the corner, and their doors are leading up from that balcony section that's right here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, see, I'm all turned around.
And we see they've got the Christmas tree up. He's going to anchor with some tablecloths. And the ship has its first boiler explosion. It seems like actually there was a couple. So, um, what's interesting to note is that this is coming out of the middle funnel. You can see that in the model here. The boilers are exploding from, well, on the Queen Mary, what would be boiler rooms 3 or 4. And here we see a massive ball of flame that ignites in the dining room before it begins to flood. This would make perfect sense because we have uh, we have the funnel uptakes that are near the bulkhead. Um, this is the forward bulkhead of the dining room. And if you think on the Queen Mary in the first class dining room, we have the forward, uh, the middle funnel casing is right there. Uh, what used to be the Windsor Salon, or I guess it still is the Windsor Salon, but they've taken the funnel casing out and made it a larger dining room. So if you had a boiler explosion, the funnel casing would probably fail, and so you are seeing the failure of the casing of the funnel uptake, and that's why you're having a ball of flame, and then of course why water would be rushing in.
All right. That makes sense. I was kind of wondering about that scene.
Yeah, and yeah, you can see there was a backlit glass panel that ran between those two gilded screens, and so the casing itself would be behind that that glass screen, and so now you've got water that's rushing through from the casing being damaged from the explosion.
Do you know, was this a separate set that was designed to be upside down, or was this the same
Yeah,
set that they?
no, the whole thing was set to be on a gimbal. It was they were able to turn it upside down, but they did all the scenes, right side up first, and then of course then they stabilized it to do the upside down shots. But yeah, no, I think it's all the same set.
And do you think they ruined those Cleopatra set pieces during this scene?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh wow, jeez,
Well, if they didn't, you know, they were sitting around on the 20th century lot, so um,
that's true.
it was just free to use. They don't. The movie studios don't salvage anything. They don't keep anything. They're very bad at doing that. Oh, I wanted to point out the wood shutters. There's a wood shutter in the chart room behind the wheelhouse.
It's all out of order.
Yeah, it is. Okay, next set. I'm trying to keep this rush here really quick. Where are we at time wise? Okay, we're at 2:30.
2:30.
Okay, I'm gonna make these real quick because there really isn't much to go through these. Um, but I think we can try and make it fast. And okay, there we go. Okay. So here we see an original shot of the Queen Mary in her main galley. This would be on our deck between the first and second class dining rooms. It was the main food preparation area of the ship. So all three dining rooms basically were served out of this dining room. I'm sorry, out of this kitchen. The third class dining room had its own separate galley to some degree forward, but still a lot of things were prepped here in the main kitchens. But what I wanted to point out was to this day, you would never see any kind of liquid gas or any kind of natural gas. You don't carry gas as a propellant for heat for ovens, stoves, heat tops, anything. This is all electric on the Queen Mary. All electric kitchen and steam and steam. No gas. Why is it that Poseidon, even the later Poseidon, the 2006 movie, gas? Because it makes good for a movie. This is all the Queen Mary's kitchens, all electric. Electric ovens, electric broilers.
Electric broilers. That's something I've never seen
Yeah,
before.
yeah. Um, I love that the kettles, the big large kettles. They can make like 60 gallons of soup at one time. I'm pointing that out because we'll see one in here in a minute. Uh, there were no actual automatically closing fire doors like this on the Queen Mary. This is definitely made for the movie. There were fire doors that were designed to close in the event of a fire alarm in certain areas of the ship, and including the passenger sections, which they still use the original fire doors to close, but not a closing door like this. You wouldn't have any kind of alarm, red light, anything like that. So he's having to go in here because the door has obviously been closed because there's a fire. Um, there must have been a flash fire because the gas burners in there were extinguished. You had a gas buildup. It reignited, and yeah. Obviously, the burners are back lit again. Why, I don't know, but they are lit. And he's going to pass through here, and we see gas. Gas, 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 gas. By the way, there's one of those, big, 55-gallon drum kettles. If you want a bunch of soup, there you go. Gas all over the place. You would never find gas on a ship, ever. Not at all. But it made good for a movie. Nothing much to say about the galley, but they are passing through the galley. So they're now aft of the dining room. They're making their way towards the engine room. This would be on the Queen Mary, but this would be also how they do it on the Poseidon. Next set.
Yeah, those big soup kettles. They still use those in very large commercial kitchens
Oh
today.
yeah, yeah, I've seen them. Yeah, I, I don't think I'd ever want to have to make 60 gallons of soup.
I've had to do it for Disney.
Really?
Yeah, they use giant square ones actually, and
Ah,
yeah,
okay. All right. Yeah, we'll start with that. Now, okay, these are when we're going to start to go out of order, but we'll make do. So I wanted to point out a crew staircase. This is actually it's forward on the Queen Mary. This is a staircase that leads down to several decks in what's known as forward storage today, but this is probably like a B deck, C deck, D deck, somewhere around there. Um, but typical crew stairway, wooden staircase. Um, a lot of times they were originally like steel bulkhead encased. You didn't have like a handrail. In fact, this was originally steel bulkhead encased, and the bulkhead has actually been cut out, and a like a galvanized pipe handrail system has been installed. That's not original, but typical crew staircase. No, I don't know why that's there. So they've left the galley and they're heading to. They need to get up to Broadway is where they're heading to. Um, and they come across a crew staircase, and I think they basically got their inspiration from the Queen Mary. It's typical. Even the same way of how the handrails are made are almost identical to how the Queen Mary's handrails are made in for these types of staircases. And we also see that they are going from B deck, which they're on now, to C deck. But they're having to use the bottom side of the staircase that leads. Oh golly, I'm from.
it is confusing.
Yeah. Oh well, yeah. So they're using the bottom side of the staircase, basically. Also typical of the Queen Mary, this type of like flooring, even in crew areas, they use this, plain, simple flooring with some A lot of this bottom molding, black molding, see that on the Queen Mary a lot.
Hmm. Maybe they just flipped the Queen Mary over to film on
That's why I think a lot of people believed it.
it.
So they're using a fire hose to bring them up on this staircase here. Just wanted to point out this would probably be on the starboard side. You usually had green and red arrows indicating lifeboat stations. So if you're on a starboard side heading to a starboard lifeboat station, it would be, I'm sorry, reverse that, port side, port side. Port side would be red, green would be starboard. So this is leading to a port side lifeboat station. Now they're supposed to be in Broadway, and they make the comment about how it would have access through the entire length of the ship. However, they come to a point to where um, their passageway is blocked. Now, Broadway, when they refer to Broadway on on the Poseidon, the Queen Mary, and pretty much every ship built, even naval vessels, have a long passageway that runs almost the entire length of the ship. Um, and on the Queen Mary, it was given the nickname of Burma Road. An interesting thing about cruise ships that operate out of the east coast of the United States, they're all named I-95. All the ships that run out of Miami and and along the east coast, they've named uh, their main passageway I-95. Makes sense. This is where he finds the block. Now, the from Burma Road on the Queen Mary, you would have been able to access the boiler rooms uh, and the engine rooms, but his path is blocked. So they need to come to a what is just known as a ventilation shaft, and we do see that he's on. It does say sea deck, but we see sea deck upside down there. Oh, there we go. There's sea deck upside down. And it just says ventilation system access. That's redundant. Ventilation system access system. Uh, I actually wanted to give some credit out. I was going to use some images from Chris Butler, who I believe is watching the live stream. He did a fantastic um, a presentation, a mockumentary of the Poseidon with graphic images. He's an artist, and he did all these graphic images of the Poseidon, and I was going to use them. And for time restraints, and also because of the problem I had with the computer, I lost a lot of the stuff that I had saved. So I want to give a shout out to him. But he had made the comment about this being a forced draft vent. I totally concur. This would be a forced draft vent that they're about to enter, and the forced draft vents. If you look at the Queen Mary at the top, you get those big square cow vents that lead down to the boiler rooms. That's what forces the fresh air, the oxygen down into the boiler rooms, feeds oxygen into the boilers through a forced draft into the firebox, and gives you a hotter, more um, more productive, output of heat energy. So I believe that this is a forced draft vent. Why there would be a long shaft that leads to the forced draft vent, there shouldn't be, but yeah. There's the long tunnel, makes good for a movie. Why didn't they close the door? I've often thought this. Why didn't they close those fire doors? They may have helped a little bit, but no, they kept the fire doors open because they wouldn't have been watertight, but they would have at least held back. Yeah, well, hindsight. Water's creeping up behind them. So they're in the shaft. The Queen Mary's forced draft vent casings are square. They should be square. I don't know why this one would be round, but it's round. Um, they will climb up 2 more decks from here, They are currently on C deck. They will go up. They will go up to E deck.
It's weird to say.
Yeah. Water down here. This is definitely just leading to an outside vent. There's nothing down there. There's no reason why there would be steam coming from down there, but there is, and it's boiling. I don't know why, but it's boiling.
It
But that
probably
should
reached the kitchen with all the
just
water,
be seawater. Yeah.
all the fire.
We can see she's passing D deck. There's a little upside down D.
Well, there have been lamps in Queen Mary's force draft vents.
Probably not. Not that I could think of. I've looked inside the force draft vents, and I don't remember ever seeing anything that even, said that there was one there. So they've gone up one more deck. Actually, I think that they went up 3 decks or 4 decks, right? Because the next screen. You can see here that that's just a screen, obviously catching birds and whatever. And then that would lead into the force draft fan room, and then the air would be then forced into the actual boiler room itself. But the thing that doesn't quite make sense though is you've got boiler explosions. The blast of the explosion itself would find its easiest way out. And, well, the force draft vent casings would definitely be an easy way out. I wouldn't want to be there. But they have another boiler explosion, and we've got a nice little red light in the little, area of water. You get a little red light that flashes, and then you get this thing. So I would assume that, the explosion has come out from the funnel, and you've got the red light that's kind of showing that there was a explosion down underwater, and then the blast has made its way through.
That's crazy. I'd never even thought about that scene. Like, now that you're talking about it, it makes so much sense why this scene does not make sense. And
Yeah.
I didn't even think about it.
All right, we're gonna move on to the next set. I hate to be rushing. I really don't want to rush, but we are going to be pushing 2 hours here in 15 minutes, so I want to try and get through as much as I can. Okay. Oh, this will be real quick. Really not much to talk about here, but I do want to bring it. So they're actually in another little like companionway, and it's definitely doesn't look crew. I mean, passenger. I would assume it's another crew companionway. This is where they meet up with the doctor. These people are all heading forward towards the bow, which is a pretty bad decision. He also runs across another damaged section of deck that he can't get through. He gets a little frustrated. This would probably be a crew barbershop. Now, on the working alleyway, there was everything. One thing that you have to remember about a ship is that it's not just like a city at sea, but it's also a city within a city, because you have everything for the passengers, and then you have everything for the crew. You're talking about 1,100 people on board for crew, so you had separate facilities. You had dining facilities, separate galleys, but you also had you had to be groomed, especially if you were dealing with passengers. So you had crew barbershops, and I believe this would be a crew barbershop. Except it's a little difficult. Except he says this is a good way of cutting hair. Strap them in, turn them upside down, and snip, snip, snip. I don't know why the chair is upside down though. That I don't understand why that would be on the deck, but it is. Robin Shelby needs to go to the bathroom. He has a little bit of a problem because everything is upside down. This is probably one of my most favorite parts of the movie is the upside down toilets and the urinals. Okay, good.
Is that at all realistic to what one of Queen Mary's crew bathrooms would have looked like if there
They're
were?
not that usually that big, no. They're usually pretty tight spaced.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we're going to. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, get rid of that. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna make this real quick because the last section is coming up here, and that's gonna be where I want to kind of concentrate more on. So Reverend Scott comes across a hatch leading up to another deck. Now it would probably be let's see, we've gone to D, E, F. So they're almost near the bottom of the ship already. Um, I was trying to figure out where this would be in relation to like the Queen Mary is concerned, and the only thing that would make sense to me would be uh, turbo generator room, access to into the turbo generator room. Uh, it makes no sense. You did have, because the boiler rooms were force draft, they are airlocked. So any access into the boiler room is a double door access. You actually have to go into one door, close the door behind you, and then equalize the pressure into that chamber, and then go into the boiler room. That's how all the boiler rooms 2 through 5 were like that, not boiler room 1. Um, but they weren't floor, they weren't deck hatches. They were regular doors. But it makes good for a movie still. He did come in through a hatch door here, and then he's going up into a bottom hatch. He's bringing everybody in through. This deck is now beginning to flood. Why didn't he close? Oh, he couldn't close the door because of the water. He was going to try and was told no, forget it. But why didn't he close the hatch? They closed the hatch, but he didn't seal the hatch behind him. Should have sealed the hatch. So I think how this is laid out really does remind me of like a turbo generator room. So I think they are in a turbo generator room at this point. The only thing that changed my mind though about that was a stern maneuvering valve.
Oh.
This could possibly be the forward engine room that they're in. This would be the platform like in the aft engine room that is still on board the Queen Mary today. That's almost identical to like the ones that you see on the platform in the aft engine room. And it would not make sense for a turbo generator room. So it could be forward engine room. I can't read the gauges. See, there are some signs that would say what the gauges are reading, but I caught that really quick, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So to try and make this really quick, they are going to be doing a swim. They're going through a corridor. They're trying to get to the engine room, and they've got all this water below them. One thing that we do have to remember about the engine room or the engine rooms on pretty much every ship, especially of this age, is that they had engine room hatches that actually went all the way up to the very top deck. This would be how you would service, turbine blades. If you had to take the whole, the turbine casing apart and pull the whole blade assembly out, it had to come up through the hatch, throughout what was a big, large skylight up at the top. What you're seeing is water that has infiltrated the hatch. So it's deep water. But they have to get from this engine room to the next engine room because that would be what would lead into the shaft alley area. I wasn't wanting to point out the inconsistencies of the movie, but that's a nice big steel heavy plate. I don't think he would even be alive if that was pushing down on him. All the air would have been extracted out of his lungs. And then Shelley Winters will dive in. Really bad mistake because she has no idea what's maybe only a few feet below that surface.
Oh,
And
that's
and
true.
she lifts that nice big steel plate, like it was nothing, but she gets him out of there. And they are now what would be the aft engine room. This trellis, this truss columns, no, not original. Looks good, but not typically what you would see on the ship.
Not
Okay,
strong enough.
not strong enough. Here is the Queen Mary's shaft alleyway. This is what the shaft alleyway would look like uh, on Poseidon if it was normal. So I had made these quite a while ago. Um, this is the original engine room, and we're looking at the aft engine room. We're looking at what is um, the starboard side condenser of the aft engine room. And when we come down here, let's see here. Let me just zoom this out. So we have the starboard high pressure turbine, which is the little pink number 2, and the starboard first intermediate pressure, which is the yellow number 3. So that the bottom window there, which I will also show, that is from the movie. And I'm going to go to the next clip here. This is the other thing I wanted to point out too, was the condenser recirculating pumps. These are the starboard side condenser recirculating pumps, 1 and 2. I have main feed or feed pump and recirculating pump. They're both recirculating pumps. That's a mistake.
And these are movie sets?
No,
The
this is original. This is all filmed on the Queen Mary. That scene from the movie is filmed on the Queen Mary, looking at those same
Oh.
condenser pumps.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In fact, I'll get to the actual screenshots here in a second. Yeah, here's another. Uh, we see the starboard high pressure turbine in green. 2 is the condenser recirculating pump, and then the other recirculating pump, the 2 and the 3 in the back there. That's from the movie, and then that's the same, looking in the same direction on the Queen Mary.
Wow. Why does this not look familiar to me though? I've been down there.
In fact, and there's the curved pipe right below the 3. There's the curved pipe. This big pipe is a movie prop.
Oh.
Oh, and those 2 vertical steel white pipes on the left, that's holding up that midsection viewing platform as you come down from the D deck exhibit area. You're coming down into the engine room, and you kind of look out over the engine room, and you can see the um, the platform um, where the throttle controls are all at. That those pipes are what are holding up that platform.
Oh, okay.
So this is the aft engine room skylight. This is what it would have looked like when the Queen Mary was in her sailing days if you looked straight up in that aft engine room. This was all decked off in several areas today during the conversion 68 to 71. But originally, you would have seen daylight through the skylight. At this point here, this was taken during the conversion, so the skylight hatch has been removed. The cover has been removed, so you're seeing full daylight up there now in this photograph. But that's what would be there on the Poseidon. So this would all be filled with water, and they're looking at having to swim into this area.
Jeez.
This is I was showing the shaft alleyways. This is showing the inner screws.
I'm gonna want that, so save that.
All right. Now this is something I'm going to point out several times in the movie shots, really quick. Is these are the condensers in the aft engine room. I believe these are the starboard. Yeah, these are the starboard condensers. But take take a mental note of these access hatches, these black painted access hatches. Oh, this is uh, the inner propeller shaft going through the aft engine room. It's got a dusting of white paint, but that long shaft on the right hand side that kind of runs at an angle is the propeller shaft coming from the forward engine room.
Oh wow.
Now, originally, they were all nicely polished as they were spinning. They would always go through here with burlap and run burlap as the propeller shafts were spinning to keep them nice and polished. This is a bearing block, and take also a mental note of this bearing block. You will see the same kind of devices on the Poseidon. Oh, and see this right here? This is a little electrical generator that's attached to the shaft. It's basically generating a small amount of DC voltage. That's what tells those remometers in the wheelhouse how many revolutions per minute they're turning. So the revometers on the wheelhouse are nothing more than a voltmeter. They're just reading voltage. As the faster they turn, the higher the voltage.
Wow.
And those are still there today. Again, the throttle platform here. This is the forward engine room actually on the Queen Mary. So the truss column there, not original, but that is the original Queen Mary aft engine room. You're
Oh, I
looking
see.
at.
So they added that truss column
Yeah,
there
they did.
for.
Yeah,
Oh, it makes sense. It's right there in the middle of a walkway.
correct. In fact, right here, like I'm trying to remember exactly how this is set up. There is no walkway. The walkway actually is below you, where you walk now. You're beneath these turbines. Um, you're down near the bottom, near the tank top. Um,
Man.
yeah, these are the shots like I had. But also making a mental note of these pumps because I'll show you them again in a second on the Poseidon. So here they are in the aft engine room. Not much to see anything recognizable in the aft engine room set, but we do see this nice silver propeller shaft that they do show that leads to this watertight door that leads into the shaft alleyway. There were watertight doors that separated the different sections of the shaft alleyway. One of them would be watertight door number 13, which we're all pretty familiar with. They're trying to assess their assess their aggress. Aggress? I don't know.
Egress,
Yeah.
egress, yeah.
Remember, I was pointing out that the black access panels of the condensers. Here they are passing by a condenser. They're not painted black, but you can see those access hatches. Identical to the Queen Mary's, just upside down.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's pretty good that they were
Yeah,
so accurate.
yeah. They're making their way on the catwalks. Oh, the other thing I'm going to point out is very much Queen Mary type catwalks with
Mhm.
the bars. It's not like expanded metal or anything like that. It's these welded bars that go across. Um, the condenser pump. There's an upside down condenser pump, just like on the Queen Mary, except upside down.
See, that's the interesting thing is because those catwalks,
Uh huh.
any movie set today would use that typical steel grating, right?
Yeah.
You can get it anywhere, because they
Right.
lay it over things.
Right.
But somebody went through the trouble to replicate those Queen Mary like slatted catwalks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jeez.
And where you see the glowing lights in the water below, engine room skylight. So that water there would be coming from the engine room skylight.
Wow.
Not really Right, but we do see that this is marked condenser cooling supply.
Mm.
Um, those pumps would be feeding the cooling water for the condenser, so that would make sense. They come across the watertight door, and yeah, what's her name? Really, kind of, she loses her grip. I but was trying to figure out what this panel was here, but it's unrecognizable. It could be pressure controls from the pressure gauges from the lubrication system for the reduction gearbox. There is a set of gauges like that. Reverend Scott meets his fate,
That
and
was a
he,
pretty epic scene.
yeah, yeah. And here we see the condenser cooling supply on that pipe. And, other than falling in some burning oil on the water, he basically just landed in that water that's on the engine room skylight. He may have been a little bit burned, but I don't know why he would have died.
Yeah. In fact, he probably would have been more burned being right over the fire the way he was.
Yeah. And they make their way to the shaft alleyway. There was a manual crank, not necessarily in this same fashion, but you were able to manually crank open the watertight doors. There was also a way to bypass the hydraulic system and let them um, reverse direction and hydraulically open them while they were closed, and then they would reclose automatically. Cranking. And these doors are almost identical to how the Queen Mary's doors appeared. I was looking for a good photograph of one, and I couldn't find one. But bearing block on the shaft, almost identical to the Queen Mary's.
Wow.
They're trying to get the attention from somebody outside. Um, Even though you have a really thick hull, it's been known that sound transfers out of the hull even through the thick steel. You can sometimes hear voice conversations going on from inside the ship, from outside the ship, and vice versa. How that happens through inch plus thick steel, I don't know, but it does. But the one thing I did want to point out is it's supposed to be an inch thick, and that sure ain't no inch thick steel. It's more like like quarter inch. It lands like a piece of sheet metal.
Now, would it with this the second Poseidon movie, would
Mm.
there have been an
Oh
outrushing of
God.
air?
So there should have been an outrushing of air when they cut this steel hull plate out. A massive amount of air because yeah, you've now exposed a rather large air bubble. Um, yeah, but these things again, they don't. So much detail and yet not detail. Okay, and then I got 6 to go really quick here. I'll just show these really quick. So they're coming out of the ship. Um, uh, the Rob was pointing out to me that he thinks that the difference in paint, like you've got dark paint and then you got light paint, is because they did do um, what they use cathodic paint. I had no idea that this even existed, but around the propellers was a dark coating of paint that was used for extra protection of the hull plate.
Hmm.
I don't know if that's what we're seeing there, but he thought maybe it might be. Um, they are on a section of little hull, but the rest of the hull that you see, including the propellers, is a matte. It's a painting that's been transposed into the film. And then the last thing I wanted to point out was they cut that big steel hull plate with that little tiny set of oxyacetylene torch. That's a little tiny oxyacetylene torch. They would have gone through multiple bottles of that stuff to cut through that steel, but that's what they did. And then they take off, and they're on the way home. Um, John Williams wrote the music, but I just wanted to point this out really quick. Alexander Courage did the orchestration, and Alexander Courage, if anybody knows, he composed the original Star Trek theme.
Oh, oh my gosh. The, yeah, the beginning music of
Mm-hmm.
Poseidon Adventure kind of sounded like Star Trek a little bit.
And then this is their thanks to Long Beach, and they did give thanks to the California Museum of the Sea, which was the Jacques Cousteau um, set up, and they do thank Specialty Queen Mary Corporation. Specialty Queen Mary Corporation was owned by David Talichet, who owns Specialty Restaurants. Specialty Restaurants still exists, but he's been passed for many years. But he owned the Reef Restaurant, which is just forward of the Queen Mary, which is still there today. He owns the Proud Bird, which Specialty Restaurant still owns, which is near LAX. Um, so he owned a whole bunch of restaurants in the Southern California area. He was the one who basically came to the rescue when Diners Club pulled out. David Talichet came in and created a new corporation called Specialty Queen Mary, and they were the ones who ran the the hotel, the restaurants, and all that. I should say the hotel, but ran the restaurants, catering, and the tours until Rather Corporation came in 1980. And PSA Hotels, uh, even though the hotel was not open yet, PSA Hotels was in the process of preparing the hotel for opening, and so they gave thanks to PSA Hotels. And that, ladies and gentlemen,
Wow.
is it.
I can't even, I know some people have said it, in the chat, but it is amazing just how much of the Queen Mary not only inspired the Poseidon, but also made it into the movie, including the replications of things that were put into the Poseidon movie.
Yeah.
It, all the way down to like the smallest details. It's unbelievable because you wouldn't really see that kind of dedication
I,
today.
I've seen this movie countless times, and every time I watch this movie, I I find something new that I had never seen before. So
Yeah.
it's always fascinating to go through and catch it. Catch all the new things that I didn't see before.
Yeah, I saw this movie only once. It was late last year, and I had to sort of rent it from Amazon or whatever. But I saw it, and I was actually pretty amazed. I don't usually watch very many of these older movies. I don't know why, but I've just never really been a fan of old movies. But um, I can honestly say that besides Wizard of Oz and Cleopatra, Poseidon Adventure is definitely up there amongst my favorites of these older movies. But
Yeah, I agree. It'll remain a classic for a while, especially in disaster films. It's definitely a classic. All right. Well, I think we need to say goodbye. I wanted to end this at a 90-minute mark, and of course we've gone way over. So I want to thank Alex for being with me today on my new adventure. We'll see. I would like to do this again. I definitely need to be more prepared on all the disasters that have happened in the last week with the computer. But I hope that you'll come back to visit again. And thank you very much for joining us today.
thank you so much. It was actually really fun.
It was. We'll talk to you later.